The food that you eat can have a massive impact on how well you train, race and recover. But there are 5 key problems that I repeatedly see when I go through food diaries with athletes, and I wanted to use today's video to talk about these and how you could improve them, because the chances are you're making them too. As a sports nutritionist, this is something that I love doing because there are usually some easy changes that you can make that can have a huge difference. Oh, and my name's James, by the way. If you're new here, then I make all sorts of videos on nutrition topics to help you train, race, and feel better. So the first big diet mistake to talk about today is protein spacing. It's really common to see people skimp on their breakfast and lunch and then go to town on their dinner. But this isn't ideal for muscle recovery or actually making improvements from your training. In simple terms, dietary protein is the one nutrient that drives adaptation from exercise. It's actually way more important than that, but let's keep on track here. But without enough protein, your body doesn't have the right tools to get stronger or fitter after exercise. And we're not just talking about bigger muscles here, we're talking about the development of more resistant or tougher muscles that can hold a higher pace or power for longer. So I encourage athletes to have at least 20 grams of protein with every meal, and these are all good sources of protein which might help to bump up your overall protein intake. Now, as well as a good amount of protein in your main meals, you also want to have a good amount of protein after exercise here. And my general rule of thumb is that if you're planning on eating within 60 minutes of finishing your session, then just have a normal meal. If it's going to be longer than 60 minutes, then have a protein-rich snack with at least 15 grams of protein. What I commonly see though is there's often a big delay between finishing training and eating. For example, people might have done a long cool down, had a shower, drove home, checked their Strava stats or whatever else it is that you do, and it's easily at least an hour since they finished their session. But instead you could have something to have immediately after your training. And examples here might be a milk-based smoothie, a whole grain sandwich with nut butter, or yogurt, nuts and seeds. Have that straight after your session, and then you can get back to Strava. Now, it's really important for athletes to eat enough carbohydrates, but it's quite common for that not to actually happen. A large majority of your exercise is going to be fueled by glycogen, which is your body's stored form of carbohydrates, but you've only got a limited amount of it, which means you need to eat carbohydrates regularly to keep those stores topped up. As a minimum, I want to see athletes eating 3 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight, up to around 10 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight if they have a high training volume. Now, the lower end of that range is pretty easy for most people to do if they're eating a good portion of carbs with every main meal. But if you're on the upper end of the range, then it can be more difficult and require some planning. And this is the carbohydrate content of different foods, so you get an idea of how much you might need to eat. Another mistake which I commonly see is that athletes just don't eat enough calories. So one of my most frequent recommendations is just to eat more. This sounds so simple, but it's honestly such a big deal. People often think that they eat a lot, but when I actually examine how many calories they really eat, it's really not that many, especially when you take into account the calories burned through exercise. You need calories to maintain your basic physiological functions, but you also then need calories to power your exercise and then create adaptations from it. If athletes aren't already eating enough carbs or protein, then that's the place to focus. Otherwise, fats can then make up the rest of the calories. Fats contain more calories on a gram for gram basis compared to carbohydrates and protein, which makes them an easy way to get those extra calories in. But I'll always try to recommend healthy fat here. So we're thinking unsaturated sources like those from nuts, seeds, and avocados. The final mistake I see is people getting so into their exercise that foods start to become off limits. You know, because they want to race as well as possible, they need to avoid X food like chocolate, and they must only ever eat the cleanest diet. This is a big no from me, and I discourage athletes from ever restricting foods completely from their diet. Food is there to serve a function in terms of calories and nutrients, but it's also there to be enjoyed. Things like sweets and treats and chocolate can definitely be a part of someone's diet, especially if it's something that they really enjoy. Now, I'm not saying that I give them the green light to just smash whatever foods that they want, because that's not the case, but they shouldn't be restricted. Instead, these sorts of foods might be built into or around training, because actually that can be a great time to use sweets. Or perhaps if having a small amount of a treat added regularly into a diet improves overall dietary adherence and quality, that might be the option to go for. Basically, you can still enjoy these foods, but as with most things, it's about moderation. This is one of those things which I'm so keen to talk about with athletes. Generally, food is not good or bad, and it's not so black and white, and instead, it's all about context. I encourage them to learn about their foods as we work together, so that they can start making their own decisions and understand why. Hopefully this video has given you some things to work on, and I've put another couple of videos up on the screen which I think you'll find helpful.